Hello, this is Mark from Enchantment of Eternity. Now you might notice that my background is a bit different today. It's not the usual background that I have, and that's because today I'm going to be talking about the board game collection that I have, or tabletop games, because a long time ago, maybe over a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, somebody in the comment section saw some of these tabletop games in my background and asked, hey, you should make a video about your game collection. I want to know more about it. And I said, okay, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. I'll get to it eventually. So now, 2 years later, I finally gotten to doing this now that my game collection is freaking huge. So I'm going to go through all of them, or most of them anyhow, and some games I'm going to talk about more than others. But obviously I'm not going to give you a detailed rundown on how to play them. I will put the name of the game like below while I'm talking about it. It says clear which game I'm talking about, and if the game piques your interest, you can use a funky little thing I heard of that some of the kids are using nowadays called Google. You may have heard of it, and you can use that to Google a particular game that you're interested in, or put it in this funky little channel that you may have heard of called YouTube, and put it in the search engine on that, and surely a video will pop up that will tell you a lot more details about the game and how to play it. But in this video, I am just going to briefly run down all of my games very quickly and what I think of them and what kind of games they are and whatnot. So this is obviously one of my hobbies. It's something I really love to do when I'm not making YouTube videos, is play these. I'm not much of a video gamer. Most of the YouTubers, almost every other YouTuber I watch, loves the video gaming. For me, I never really got into that. I don't know how people find time for that, quite frankly. I'm more into the tabletop or board game, card game type thing, which, you know, a funky little person that you Star Trek fans may have heard of named Will Wheaton actually has a YouTube show about tabletop games as well, so you might want to check that out. Anyway, if you're not interested in this, then why'd you click on this video, and you might as well stop watching. But if you want to see my collection, then here we go. I'm going to run down very quickly what games I play and what ones I don't. So just to get my sort of history of how I first got into tabletop games, I had a couple a circle of friends in New Zealand, a small circle of friends. Usually it was just 3 of us, sometimes 4. And there was this person who lived just down the road from me who would rent. He had like thousands of board games, and he would rent them from his home as a business. And so I used to go there and get a different game every week. I had a membership, so we played lots of different games, tried them out, because I didn't really have the money to buy them all. That wasn't until I moved to America. But by that time, when I moved to America, I had the money, and the games are cheaper here than they were over there. It's like some of them were like $100, $150 for here. There I can get them for like 20 or 40, depending. So much more in my price range, and so I knew which games I liked from renting them before and going to game nights, various game events and cons and whatnot, board gaming cons, and found some games that I really liked, so I knew which ones I would like to play. So yeah, so I'm going to be talking about my gaming friends, my gaming circle from New Zealand, which, as I said, was smaller and more into strategy games. And then there's my gaming circle here in America, which mostly contains my family, a few friends of the family, but they're more into the party games thing, which is why I have a lot of those. Anywho, let me get started. So let me start with my favorite game, Dominion. It's not Wayum and the founder aren't in this one, but it is a card game This is the one. I don't really play it anymore because my new gaming circle don't like it. It's too complicated for them. Or a few of them do, but not enough for us to play it very often. Whereas my old gaming circle in New Zealand, this is all we ever played. Like eventually, like we started, as I said, renting different games and playing all these different games. But for the last like year or so that I was there, this is pretty much all we played. It took over our whole gaming thing. So this is an empty box, and this is in fact fun trivia. This is the box I use to prop up my camera when I record all my videos. So I'm having to use a different box with this video. That's why the camera might be a bit wonky, because I'm used to using this box. And the reason why it's an empty box is because Dominion has different expansions. There's the base set where you buy the cards, and then there's like 9 or 10 different expansions, and I own like 8 of them. So instead of having 8 of these freaking boxes everywhere, I condensed it all into 2 of these nifty little baseball card type boxes. So what Dominion is, it's a card game where you select 10 different cards at the start of your turn. You have, in addition, you have money and you have victory point cards. So you lay out the 10 cards in a grid, and each 10 copies of each of the 10 cards. And then you play money from your deck in order to buy those cards. And when you buy them, you add them to the deck, which lets you do funky things like get more card draws, get more actions to play more cards, or a lot of funky other things. And maybe get more money because they're just different denominations of money, whatever, you can buy those. And that lets you buy better cards. And eventually your goal is to buy victory points. And of course, the victory points that are worth a lot more money cost more, so you got to get higher money, more card draws in order to get it. As I said, I'm not going to go through it exactly, so if you're confused by that, go look up the rules. But essentially you're buying cards and adding them to your deck, so your deck is getting bigger the more you play them. And this is why I have so many expansion sets and why it's my favorite game, because every time you play it's different, because there's so many different cards. Like every expansion set has like I think 30 or so cards, and so every time you play you can put a different selection of 10 cards out to play with, so the game is always different. So that's why it was our favorite game, because it had the same sort of card draw and rules, but every game was different, so we never got sick of it, compared to another game, hold on, over here, that I'll get to later that I'm so sick of. But anyway, but this one I don't get sick of it. But I haven't played it in a long time. Hardly ever played anymore since I left New Zealand. I miss my New Zealand friends because of that. I do go online and play it sometimes, but it's not the same. Anyway, so that's Dominion. So keeping in the category of strategic card games, let's go to Guildhall, which is something that my current gaming circle likes it a little bit better, so we play it a little bit more because it's a little bit more simple. You have 9 different characters and you have multiple different colors of each character, and the goal is to collect all 5 colors of a certain character, but every time you play a character they do different things and give you different rules. And again, you're buying victory points, so it's kind of similar to this but not as good. But I still enjoy playing good old Guildhall every once in a while, and every time I play it I like to say Guildhall. I don't know why. Anyway, this is a game, speaking of strategic card games, this is a game, I'm holding it upside down, Architectura, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, that I just bought this a couple weeks ago, so I'm just gotten new to it, but I kind of like it. It's again a simpler game, so my new gaming circle likes it a little bit better. There's you have a grid that you're building different buildings in within this grid in the city, and each building gives you different points and it gives you different abilities. You can destroy the building next to you, so it's a bit of a interactive game like that, and I like it so far. I think it's pretty good. Let me duck under here to get San Juan. Now, before I started playing Dominion with my old New Zealand Circle, gaming circle, this was our favorite game until we found Dominion, but we still played this every once in a while as well. In fact, my new gaming circle, actually, this is probably their favorite strategic game, so non-party game that they like to play. It's a 4-player game. It's kind of similar. It's about building buildings. You build, it's like you build, there's different phases, like one that lets you draw a card, one lets you build a building, one that lets you produce a good for your production plan, and one that lets you sell the good for the production plan, which just lets you draw cards. It's a bit complicated to learn, I guess. Well, not really. I mean, once you got in the hang of it, it's quite simple. It's actually based off of another game called Puerto Rico that is way more complicated, and I didn't like it. My gaming circle didn't like it. I know my current gaming circle definitely wouldn't like it. This is like the card version of Puerto Rico. San Juan, capital Puerto Rico. Get it? Anyways, but it's so simpler, easy to play. And this is something that you'll find. Like, the Dominion, I think, is kind of complicated, but overall, you'll find most of the games that I play are not very complicated. Like, there's some like 2 or 3 hour games that have like a ridiculous amount of rules, like a freaking novel as a rule book. I don't play games like that, and nobody in either of my gaming circles would like games like that. I think they're a bit boring and tedious. So most of the games I play are like last between 30 and 45 minutes. To be fair, my current gaming circle is really slow and they take a long time, so our games last more like an hour to an hour and a half. But if you have good players who know what they're doing, it can last 30 to 45 minutes. And they're fairly simple once you get the, I mean, it's always confusing when you're learning a new game like that, but it's fairly simple once you get the hang of it. Whereas something, like there's this one that was called like Terraforming Mars I played once, and it was so complicated it made me want to, my brain wanted to explode. It was not fun. Anyway, let's see, card games. Well, since I'm on the topic of strategic card games, I might as well talk about Fluxx. Now, Fluxx you may have heard of if you know anything about tabletop games, because it's quite a popular one. There's very different varieties of Fluxx. As you see, that was Next Generation Deep Space Nine. This is the Cartoon Network one. This is the first one I ever had. And most recently, I bought the Mighty Python one. Now, this is the game I actually play on my phone the most when on my spare time. I play the base game on that because that's what they have on the app. But I like playing these different versions. They're a little bit more complicated. Maybe the base version's better. The thing with Fluxx, and that there's 1 or 2 players in our current gaming circle who hate this game, so I don't get to play it as much as I would like. Because it can be confusing, because the thing with Fluxx is, the whole point is that the rules are constantly in flux. So you have characters, like if you were playing Deep Space Nine, you would have Deep Space Nine characters, Odo and Quark and Odo, and I said Odo twice, but Garrick and Kira, and you put them in front of you, and they're your keepers, and then you have goals, which have a picture of 2 different characters on it, so if someone plays a goal that has the 2 characters that you have, you win. It seems simple enough, but the rules are constantly in flux. How many cards you can draw, how many cards you can play per turn, how many cards you can have in your hand, and how many cards your opponents are allowed. Like, all this stuff is constantly in flux, because you could play different rules that do different things constantly, so the rules of the game are constantly changing. I like it that way. There's different kinds of, like, the different kinds of Fluxx has different kind of mechanisms to it. I can't remember the Cartoon Network one. I think that this one was fairly simple, which is why I kind of like it. The Deep Space Nine one has Deep Space Nine one has too many stealing. You steal other keepers from other people too much. It's constantly moving. It makes my head hurt. The Mighty Python one, which it's a funny one to play, because it has all these fun Mighty Python, mostly the Holy Grail reference, and I love that movie. It's only really Mighty Python I got into, like, that has a card for the Beast of Arg and the Spanish Inquisition. This one has too many creepers, which are like the negative things that do negative things to you. That's this one's gag, and I think that's too many creepers. Next gen one, it has these like weird funky cards, like a Darmok one where you have to say everything is the proper noun and you get to draw an extra card. That's funny. Anyway, so that's Fluxx. What else have we got? So, card games. We got this game called Loot, which I bought on sale for like $3 in New Zealand, or $5, so it was like super cheap, and I never really played. What is this game? I played it like once or twice. I played it once before I bought it, so I knew what it was. And it's like, oh, that game was okay. And I played it maybe 3 times after I bought it. You just, I don't know, it's not that good. You have pirate ships. You play pirate ships and merchant ships. And if your merchant ship doesn't get attacked, you get the points. But if you attack someone else's merchant ship with your pirate ships, you get the point. And I don't know. It's a fine, I guess. This game, Time Chase, I bought this like a year ago. I haven't played it that much. In fact, a couple of my people in my current circle of gaming circle wanted to play this game yesterday or this past weekend, and I couldn't remember the rules. So I was like, oh, all right, we'll have to wait a week because I have to relearn this game because it's been so long I played. I remember it's like there's like different cards you play. You have to have different like suits, and whoever has like the highest number of this particular suit wins that timeline. But there's like a timeline, and you can travel back in time. And so where there was a different or earlier round that someone else's won, you could travel back in time, play a different card, and win that round. It was interesting. I would be willing to play that one again. Maybe not my favorite one, but I just got to relearn it. This is another one I just bought. Oops, upside down again. Not that long ago, like last week. This is because I have friends that I play with virtually on like Zoom or whatnot, and this is a good one to play over that because there's no cards in your hand. It's just like there's a little ship like the one pictured here, and you have little pebbles going downwards, and you have divers, so you have to dive down, collect treasure, but it's not a cooperative game. Those I'll get to later. And you have to bring the treasures back to the ship before you run out of oxygen, but everyone is using oxygen, so the more people pick up treasures, the more oxygen is getting used. I wanted to play this game again, but my friends didn't like it because we kept running out of oxygen and nobody was scoring any points at all for like, I think we played one whole game where no one scored points, and then the second game we played, the first round nobody scored points, but then we finally scored points in the other round. It's a bit tricky. Anyway, Cattitude. This game was just okay. I'm not sure if I actually liked it that much. I just love the theme. The theme, because I'm a cat person, and as soon as I heard of the theme was that you each play cats in a house trying to destroy or knock over stuff, and you score points by knocking over shit, but you have to make sure that the human doesn't catch you, because the human catches you, they'll clean it up and you won't be able to destroy shit. That's just such a cool theme, but the game itself is just kind of iffy. I wasn't that big on it. Kingdoms is one of the very first games that I played when I was renting the games in New Zealand. It was one of my favorite games, in fact. And so when I moved back to America, I didn't have it, and it was out of print. So for the longest time, I couldn't find it. It wasn't until just like 2 or 3 weeks ago I finally managed to get it on eBay, grab a copy of it. I've probably paid more than what it's worth, but not too much. Like I saw a copy going for like $100, and I'm not fucking paying that. I got this for like $40. It's like a grid. There's a grid, and you can draw cards that all say like +1, -1, and then you play castles in the grid, and when you play a castle, you score negative and positive points for every other card that's in that row and column. So if it says +1, +4, -3, then you get a net plus whatever. I'm not doing math right now, but that's how it's played, and I quite like it. I think it's interesting. I'm not sure my new gaming circle is not big into it, but yeah, that's the one that first got me into games, and I kind of like the simplicity of it. So let's get into Ticket to Ride, upside down again. Ticket to Ride. This one is one of the most popular games. I think a lot of gaming sites refer to this as the best board game ever. I don't really think so. This and the other one I've seen is Pandemic, which I don't have, but I'll talk about that later. I didn't think Pandemic was all that great. Ticket to Ride is better. And this one's the USA. That's a classic version. They have other continents and countries and whatnot. And you're building trains for this one across the USA. And there's only a certain amount of tracks. You have to have the right cards in order to build the trains. And you have certain destinations to get to. You score more points. Like you draw different ticket cards that have different destinations, like New York City to Boston, or not that's too short. But like New York City to Los Angeles, that's better. New York City to Miami, or something like that. But everyone else has different destinations they want to get to, but sometimes you're building on the same tracks and you can block each other, and it's a really fun game. That way it's very competitive. I find this game personally to be very stressful. I'm like so stressed out because I'm trying to get to my destination, and then there's another player who's like going to build on my track exactly where I need to go, and I'm like, please don't block me. It's so stressful, but it is a lot of fun. Currently, my friends in New Zealand play this on the app a lot, and it's their favorite game so much. But anyway, yeah, I enjoy this one. However, more recently, I bought this game, which is very similar to Ticket to Ride. It's called Trekking the National Parks. I actually like this one better. I watched a documentary about the people who created this game, and they loved Ticket to Ride, and they kind of based it off it a bit because you got the map of the U.S. and you're traveling to different national parks, but it has several different mechanisms. Where Ticket to Ride is you just build trains, where here you're trying to like collect these pebbles at the different national parks, and you're trying to collect the national park cards, and there's different, and you can camp at the regional, like there's 6 like regional national parks or great national parks that you play with every time. You can put your tent there and camp. Gives you special abilities. So I really like this game. I want to play it more. I'm trying to get my friends to play this more, but they're like, in the last 3 weeks they wouldn't play it. I'm like, I want to play this game, but maybe I'm just playing it too much. I don't know. Anyway, what do we got next? So oh, now it's upside down. Here we go. Tsuro. This is a very classic game. A lot of people probably heard of it. I played this a couple times when I was in New Zealand. I bought this just a couple of months ago, so it had been a while since I played it when I first bought it a couple months ago. This one, as you play, you have these tiles with different streams of rivers, and you have a ship, and when you play the tile in front of your ship moves. However, there's many streams on that tile, so if there's another ship nearby, it also moves in the tile. And so you can determine how other people's ships move, and the point is to for your ship to survive, and the other ships not to, once you get knocked off the board. So you're trying to knock your opponent's ships off the board while keeping your ship alive. In the meantime, in this version anyway, I know the original version doesn't have, but this version, the only one I've played, has dragons that move every turn depending, well, not every turn, but they move depending on the dice roll, and the dragons are going to try to eat your ship as well. So you're trying to not get knocked off the board and not get eaten by the dragons. Yeah, it's funny. I had played games like this where it lasts like 10 minutes, and I played games with this that lasted like an hour and a half. I think the longest game I had, and I got knocked out early, but my family was still playing, and they were helping each other, and the game wouldn't end. I'm like, of course the game's not going to end because you're helping each other. The whole point is to try to not eliminate each other. Anyway, they didn't really know how to play it. So this game I got as a birthday present last year, 2020. So not my last birthday, but my 2 birthdays ago. My birthday's in March 2020. So we got to play it once before the pandemic hit, and we stopped playing in person. But then we started meeting in person after we all got vaccinated this year. So we got to play it a couple more times. I had played it before. I actually didn't think that much of it when I played it in New Zealand, but my, friend bought this as a birthday present, so I thought I'll give it another go. And I'm kind of interested in this game. It is okay. You each play a different region, and you have these cards, and you're trying to build resources. And the more resources you have, the more cards you can play. That gives you more victory points and more other abilities. But the interesting thing about this game, the thing that a lot of people in my current gaming circle hate about this game, is that after every round, like, you play a card and then you pass your hand to the next person. Like, everyone passes their hand, so the hands are constantly moving, and a lot of people can't deal with that. I play an online version of this that was a lot, like, faster, but which I kind of like better, to be honest. But then they upgraded it and totally fucked up the gameplay. I never went back and saw if they corrected it. Anyway, Seven Wonders. That was an interesting one. Next is the classic. Surely you had heard of Catan. Apparently is quite big in Germany, where it originated. It's like the monopoly of Germany. Well, probably not. But anyway, so this is the base. It's a Catan. You have a map. You have a little hexagon with all these different hexagons on the map, and they have different resources. And you build your settlements on them. If you have a settlement on the resource, you roll the dice, and the number that's on the resource happens to come up where you have your settlement, then you get a resource, and you use those resources to build more roads and build more settlements. Basic version. So this is the base game. That's just the island, the grid. I got the expansion. Oh shit, dropping everything. The expansion that I really like, that has the seafarers, so you can make the map even bigger. Problem with this, though, is you need a really big table. Almost every time I play this version, I run out of space on the table because it makes the map really huge. But it gives you more options because you have ships that you can build across the sea. You can sail to different islands, and you can have like this mystery card that gives you a resource of your choosing. It makes the game a lot more interesting, in my opinion. So I always try to play with this when I can. And plus, it gives you more space to move around. And the first board game, or of these ones anyway, not counting when I was a kid or whatnot, but the first board game that I bought in this collection, Star Trek Catan, which is of course, the Star Trek version of Catan, where you're in space. You're building space stations and little enterprise ships instead of roads to connect them, and you roll resources just like you would in Catan. You get different resources like dilithium or water or oxygen. Because I got this, as I said, games in New Zealand were way more expensive. Like, this would normally cost over $100. I got this for $50 because it's in German. All of the cards are in German, and so it's a bit. That's why I don't really play with it that much anymore, because it's a bit frustrating. You get the that's Klingon, not German, but whatever. You get the different. Everything is in German, so I have a rule book that translates all the cards to English, but it's still a bit frustrating to learn it to play it that way. Anyway, so that's Catan. Oh, if you haven't, you should check out this video called The Settlers of Brooklyn. That's making fun of that game, where it's about, making fun of hipsters who settle in Brooklyn, like you collect kale and a vinyl record. It's hilarious. Anyway, God. Okay, so let's go to Camel Up. Camel Up. This is a good game to play with more people. If you have 5 or more people, this works a lot better. If you have less than 5 people, it doesn't work very well. It's basically, you race, camels are racing, you roll dice, and there's different rules for how the camels move, and you bet on them. You and the players aren't a camel. So many times I played this game, even when people had played it before, and they're like, which camel am I? It's like, you're not a camel. You're betting on the camels. And so the whole point is you can bet on different things. Which camel's going to win the round? Which camel's going to win the game? You could try to put your token down to hinder a certain camel or help a certain camel if you're betting on them. I think it's a lot of fun. It's one of my favorite games. A couple of people in my current circle of gaming love it, and a couple of people don't like it so much. So it's a discussion thing. Anyway, Alright, so now let me get into a different category. Let me talk about lying games. Basically games where you're trying to act or pretend or to fool someone. I have a certain person in my current gaming circle who refuses to play these games. And also these games are better with more people. Hence, I have one or two people who refuse to play them, so I never get to play them. And even my old circle game, circle of gamer friends, as I said, mostly it was just 3 of us, so that was not enough people to play them. So it was rare that we actually got enough people to play this game. So I love these games probably the most because I never get to play them, because I never have enough people who want to play them. Anyway, my personal favorite, and my friend at all is like scarily great at this game. Like, it scares the hell out of me how good she is at lying. But it's called One Night Ultimate Werewolf. I had the other werewolf version, but I never actually played that. I bought that by accident. I actually meant to buy this. One Night Ultimate Werewolf, where there's an app. And so each round only lasts 5 minutes, and there's different characters. You can choose different characters for each game. You have the number of players that you have plus 3. So you shuffle the characters around, and there's 2 werewolves, and the werewolves, of course, eat everyone. So the whole point of the game is try to figure out who the werewolves are, and the werewolves are trying to figure out trying to not be figured out, trying to deceive everyone into thinking that they're not a werewolf. But it gets a bit tricky because other cards can move cards around, so maybe you were the werewolf and then you're not. I know some people are really confused by that mechanism, but that's part of the fun of the game, is trying to figure out where the cards have moved. And you try to rely on other people to say, because they'll outright say, I moved this card there and I moved this card there. But did they really, or are they a werewolf lying to you? So it becomes a trick of trying to figure out where the cards went, or who is like just totally bullshitting you. There's a certain character card in here called the Drunk, who just switches with the card in the middle. So it's probably the easiest card to pretend to be if you're the werewolf. And I remember playing a game once with 4 people, it was 4 people, and every single one said that they were the Drunk. Love that game. Anyway, the other lying game is Spyfall, which I actually, since I had an extra person come this past weekend, actually got to play it, even though that one player abstained. I'm like, you abstained. We still have 5 players, so we'll play it. It's similar to the other one where, alright, so there's all these different locations, and you grab a location at random. You don't know which one you're grabbing, and then you shuffle out the number of cards to the number of players. So every player gets 1 card, and then we'll either have the exact same location. So everyone will be at the same location except for one person. So if the location, for example, was a casino, then everybody is at that casino except for one person who just has a card that says Spy. So they have no idea where they're at. And so the point of the game is try to figure out who all the people at the location, at the casino in this example, are trying to figure out who else is at the casino and who's the spy, where the spy is trying to figure out what location they're at. So where the gameplay goes, you just ask random questions like, what'd you have for breakfast? What time did you get up? How was your day today? Something very innocuous, because you don't want to be too obvious. Like if you're at like the polar caps, you're like, is it freezing outside? Because then the spy is going to go like, you're at the polar caps. You don't want to be too obvious. You want to be a bit tricky so the spy doesn't figure out what location you're at, but at the same time you want to try to root out the spy, because you can kind of tell when the spy is giving really vague answers that could apply to anything. So that's a cool game. I really like it. Other lying game I have, which I think I only got to play this game like once or twice since I bought it. I did play it several times in New Zealand though before I bought it. And again, we usually didn't have enough people to play it, because for this, it's best to play with like 5 or 6 people. There's a murderer, and so people are trying to have to figure out who the murderer is. And in this case, you have a forensic scientist who knows who the murderer is, but they can't outright say, so they're giving you clues. So there's the murderer will have a weapon and another item, and don't actually, not only do you have to guess who the murderer is, you have to guess exactly what the two items are, the murder weapon and the other items are. And so the forensic scientists will have these cards that they can clue in exactly what the murder weapon is, and you're trying to figure it out. Meanwhile, all the players can talk over it, so the murderer can try to bullshit and deflect suspicion to other players. I personally love this game, but hardly ever get to play it. Anyway, cooperative games. Let's talk about cooperative games. So, there is Forbidden Island. I like this game, but I think I only like to play it every once in a blue moon. I think it's very repetitive, playing it more than once. So I like to give it a couple months break in between playing it each time. It's only a 4-player game. It's a cooperative game. You're on an island, a forbidden island that is sinking, and you're trying to collect these artifacts, and you're working as a team, and so you're working against the clock before the island sinks, and you're trying to shore up the island so it doesn't sink too fast. But if you don't collect all the items in time, you lose. If you do collect them in time, get to the helicopter pad and leave the island, you win. So it's a fun game, but as I said, this is once in the blue moon. It gets tedious playing it too often. Unlike Dominion, which I can play multiple times. Anyway, other cooperative game. A friend in my current gaming circle actually has the real version of this called 5 Minute Dungeon. I had the Marvel version, 5 Minute Marvel. I actually like the Dungeon version better, but I have the Marvel version, which is pretty good in its own way. So each play in this game, you play a character, and of course in this case you play a Marvel character. In the Dungeon one, you play like a ninja, a thief, magician, the stereotypical role-playing roles. And they each have different cards, and there's cards that are the same, and there's like these minions that you're trying to defeat. They all have symbols on it, so you're trying to draw cards with that symbol, so everyone plays that card with the symbol, so you work as a team. So basically the whole team is like throwing out cards saying, oh, I got this, and sometimes people will double up. If you double up, it's useless, you lose it. So it's communications key, but there's a 5-minute time limit, hence the name of the game. And so you're trying to defeat all these cards within the time limit, so it's a very fast moving, shouting hectic game, but I quite like it. Anyway, my favorite cooperative game is called Star Trek 5-Year Mission. Now this is funny because this is probably a lot of these games, before I buy them I researched them, and this is probably the only game that I saw multiple negative reviews saying it's not a very good game, and yet I got it anyway. This is one I actually rented first when I was in New Zealand, and I liked it, so eventually I bought it. And the funny thing is, pretty much everyone in my both gaming circles also like this game, also love this game. Do you remember, most of you watching this probably know who Wes from the Penske file is. He actually did a video about this game, and he also gave it a negative review. But it's not just him, like all these other serious gamers that say it's not a very good cooperative game, it doesn't work. It's my favorite cooperative game. And it's most of the other people I know who are in my gaming circles also their favorite cooperative game. So I don't know, we're weird, but I quite like it. So how it works is you each play a different character. I always play the next generation version because I don't like the original series version, but you can either choose to play next gen or original series. I always play next gen, and you each play a different character from the crew, and they all have different abilities, and you all have dice that you roll, and there's cards that are flipped every turn. You have to flip a card that will have a certain amount of dice that you need to roll in order to defeat it, and every dice are in different colors, so you have to match the color and the number of the dice to the card in order to defeat it, and you're constantly flipping over cards. And if you fail on too many missions, or 5 of them, you lose the game. But the goal is different goals depending on the difficulty level. We usually play the easy level where you're trying to get 10 cards. Sometimes we play a bit more difficult as 12. I think the hardest level is 20. I've never played that because I actually think that this is the hardest cooperative game I ever played, or one of the hardest, but I found out that actually for a while I was playing it wrong because you're supposed to separate the next gen and TOS cards. So if you're playing the next generation characters, you only use next generation cards. If you're playing the original series character, you only use original series cards. And for a while we were using all of them, and that actually made it a lot harder. So once we started separating it out, it got a little bit easier, but because we used to lose almost every time, so it became like a real mission to try to finally win. But once we actually started playing it right, it got a little easier to win, but we still lose. It's still hard. That's contrast to Pandemic, which is the game I mentioned before. I don't have. I think one of these days I might buy it. There are several times where I almost bought it. It's an okay game. It's made by the same people who made The Forbidden Island. And it's very similar to that, but a bit more complicated, and it's really topical now after 2020. And as I said, some websites were calling it the best board game ever because it's a cooperative game, and there's like a map of the world, and they're trying to like solve this pandemic before it gets out of control. And I thought the game was so easy to beat every single time. And I've heard other players and people who love the game saying, "What are you talking about? It's hard to beat. You must be playing it wrong." And I was like, okay, so I do this and I do that and I do this. And they're like, "No, that's right. You're doing that right. You're doing that right. You're doing that right." So everyone I talk to, when I talk about the specific ways we played, they're, "Yeah, you're doing it right." Then why is it so easy for me to beat it? Like they're talking like it's hard. I think it's too easy. Anyway, I don't know. So, party games, I guess. As I said, these are my current gaming circle's favorite type of games to play. This is the ones mostly we play virtually over Zoom. This one's Wits and Wagers. You ask a question that in the answer's a number, so everyone takes a guess of what number they were, put their number down that they think is the answer. They write it down, and then you can bet on what number the people have selected is closest to the correct answer without going over. And so you get points if your answer was the correct one, and you get points if you bet on the correct answer, and you can bet 2 or 1 points, so you can like hedge your bets and put your things on different markers. It's okay. I'm kind of sick of this one. We played it too much, but it's okay. And then there is the very similar version to that, upside down again, Say Anything, which is it's very similar. Your question is asked, and every player will write down their answer. This one's a bit more fun, I think, because you can come up with crazy shit. It depends on what kind of mood you're in. If you're in a goofy mood, this can be a lot of fun. So, a question is asked, and everyone comes up with their answer, and they lay it out in front of them, and the person who asked the question gets to choose what the best answer is, and so everyone else is trying to guess what that person chose as the best answer, so you can bet on the different things on there. And again, you have 2 tokens, so you can hedge your bets and bet on different things. You get points the more you bet on, or if you wrote the correct answer, then you get extra points for that. So very similar. I think, again, I'm getting a little sick of this one. I try not to play it too much. We played it too much, but it can be fun. Blockbuster. So this is a game that I like. It's a movie game, obviously, and there's 2 rounds. There's the everything's okay. Okay, there's 2 rounds in Blockbuster. There is the head-to-head round where you're given a topic like movies that take place in space, movies that have a spy, and then you have one player that you're going head-to-head with, so you go back and forth and name a movie like James Bond, Star Trek, whatever. You slap the thing, it gives you 10 seconds, and if the timer runs out in that 10 seconds, then you lose. And the team that won the round get to select first in the next round. So the next round, there's 3 categories. There's acted out, which is like charades. And then there is one word where you're saying one word. and then there is Quote It. So the person who won the first round draws 6 cards, and each card has a movie title on it. And so they select which 3 they want for their team, and they give the other 3 to the other team. And each team puts those 3 movies into a different category, and you try to get other members of your team to guess what movie by doing the thing, by saying one word, or by saying a quote from the movie, or by acting out in silent charades. And so apparently people don't like playing this game with me because I'm too good at it. Or at least I know a lot more about movies than they do, and they find it difficult. But I think it depends on which team I'm on, because if the player I'm with isn't understanding what I'm trying to tell them, then it doesn't help. But then again, if they're giving the clues, I usually pick up on it quicker. But so this is a game I kind of had to convince people to play because they know I'm too good at it. And it's funny because when I went out to Oregon to visit my brother and sister, and I always bring some of these games and play them, and we played this game, and they giving me a hard time, and they keep giving me a hard time about the fact when Karate Kid came up, that for charades, the silent clues, like they said I should just went like this for Karate Kid. Like that was, I can't do the whole thing, it was like that, like it was the most obvious thing ever. I don't get it. I totally don't get it. And they always like make fun of me and put me down for that. And so that's the easiest thing. Obviously that's Karate Kid. I don't remember that movie. I was a little kid when I saw it. I never saw it again. I don't really like that movie. I don't know that this is Karate Kid. We're playing a different game, which I'll get to later, where there's a picture of like a demon and a ballerina dancer, and I was like, that's so obviously Fantasia, so I gave the clues Fantasia. I have no idea. And they're like, how are we supposed to know it's Fantasia? You're just being your stupid movie self, Mark. No one would get that. Everyone should get that. I think that was the most obvious thing ever. It was more obvious than this, whatever the fuck that means. But anyway, it's different people have different backgrounds with different movies. Like when I was playing it with my current circle of friends, and the movie Predator come up, and I was like, get to the chopper, and they didn't get it, and I was so frustrated. They're like, what, get to the chopper? What is he talking about? I was like, come on, do it no. And I was like, do it? What does do it? Like, can't you tell a freaking Arnold Schwarzenegger impersonation when you hear one? God damn it. Anyway, so that's Blockbuster. Good old code names. This probably, if you know anything about games, you probably heard of this one. It's a very, very popular one. You can find it pretty much everywhere. It's almost like Battleship now. Oh, maybe not quite. It was always my favorite party game, too. That is until I played it like a billion trillion times every week in a row, and I am so goddamn sick of it. And code names, there's a grid of words laid out, and you're in a team. You're trying to get the other members of your team to guess, because each word in the grid belongs to a team. Like, we'll have a color, the blue team or red team. So every word in the grid will belong to either a team or be neutral, be the assassin. And so you're trying to get the other members of your team to guess which words belong to you, but you can only give one word clues in order to get them to guess. And it's quite easy if you just use one word. If you're just going for one word on the grid, but you're trying to do more than one word so you can get all your words before the other team, so it makes it harder to try to match words by just saying one word. And then there's the pictures version, which I like better, and sometimes I like to mix them up. Instead of being words on the grid, it's pictures on the grid, and you say one word to try to get your team to guess which words belong to you. And there's also this is my mother's game, the Disney version, where they have pictures of Disney characters, and you're trying to get your teammates to guess that. That's a bit harder. I usually mix that one up with the other two when I play that one. And I bought the Marvel version, but absolutely nobody likes playing this. For one thing, the pictures are a bit hard and difficult to see, particularly when we're playing over Zoom. They're not very big or colorful, and a lot of people just don't get it, like the Marvel characters. Like even Alyssa didn't like this one. So there you go. So that was just wasting my money on that one, but whatever. That I'm so sick of that game. That's all I ever want to play. Oh, anyway. Another party game. I should have known that. It's a simple trivia game. There's cards in here. They all have 6 trivia questions, and they're all like, most of them are fairly like simple. That, oh, you should have known this, and some of them, like, I don't know, like asking me which Spice Girl. Like, I don't want to know that, but most of them are fairly simple stuff. I haven't played that one that much. It's okay for trivia. This is What Do You Meme? I don't actually like this game. There's someone in my gaming circle who does like this and they want to play, so I humor them every once in a while and play it, but I really don't like it because there's like these internet memes and you're dealt these cards that have different captions for the memes, and so you select everyone puts their card out, and the player's turn who chose the meme gets to select the best caption for it. And the reason why I don't like this game is because maybe I'd like the family edition better, but this version is very juvenile. I think it's geared towards like teenagers and kids in their 20s, and the people I play with are actually much older than me, so they don't really get any of the references, and I don't really get them either. I don't really find them funny. I find them like toilet humor, so I don't know why they want to keep playing that. I don't really like that one. Just One. I just bought this game a couple weeks ago. This is a good party game. It's good for playing over Zoom. It's a cooperative game where there's a word. There's one player whose turn is who can't see the word, so they have their back turned or whatever, and everyone else can see the word, so they're trying to get that one player to guess what the word is by only writing down one word, kind of like code names. But if anyone writes down the same word, then that word's eliminated, which can make it a bit difficult. So again, this is kind of, you want to have at least 5 people for this one. Half Truth is another game that I just bought 2 weeks ago. I really love this one. I actually probably going to play it more. It's also good for playing over Zoom. There's a card that you flip and has a question with 6 possible answers, 3 of which are wrong, 3 of which are correct, and you're trying to guess which answers are correct. Now, you can either go for 1, in which you get the move, but you can go for 2 or 3, try to guess all 3 of the correct answers, in which you get bonus points. But if you get even one of your guesses are wrong, you get nothing. So it makes it riskier to try to go for more than 1. But if you get it right, like I played this once, I had a question that was Star Wars characters who said, I have a bad feeling about this. And I got all 3 easily. Other people got it wrong. They tried to go for 2 and they got it wrong. It was, or at least out of the 6 listed on the card, it was Obi-Wan Kenobi, Han Solo, and C-3PO. So those I remember. Like the other ones on the card, it had like Yoda and Qui-Gon Jinn and God, I'm trying to remember. Oh, Lando Calrissian. Someone guessed Lando and they got it wrong. He never said it. I know C-3PO and Han Solo. And Obi-Wan was mainly from the prequels, but he said it in the prequels. Anyway, Medium. I don't play this one very often because it is damn hard. It can be really frustrating. So basically, you and another player take turns being on the team, and you each play a different card with a word on it. And so once each player puts their word on it, say if there's one that says beach and one that says sky, you have to think of a word. Each of the 2 players whose turn it is, has to think of a word that those 2 words, that matches those 2 words, that goes along with beach or sky. Like I could say something like ocean or tsunami, or I don't know, something that I would think would fit both words. But the thing is, you and the other player have to say that word at the same time. The goal is to try to say the exact same word. And as I said, this can be very fucking hard, because sometimes you'll say like a very similar word, but you're off. You're not thinking the exact same thing, and sometimes the other player's brain just goes in a different direction than what your brain is. There was one time I played this with my dad, and we kept saying food for everything because they did have to do with food, and other players got really pissed off, like, you shouldn't be on the team for everything, you're just going to say food every time. But you say like refrigerator, you have like refrigerator and like kitchen or something, you're gonna say food. I'm sorry, but anyway. But yeah, I don't know. I don't like that game that much. It's a bit too. It can be frustrating. All right. So there's Timeline. I just bought this, but I played it before. This has very limited playing abilities. Like, once you play it a few times, it kind of plays it out. So each card will have an event. And, well, this theme is the events, historical events. There's different themes and whatnot. There was a movie one that I loved, but that's out of print now. But anyway, this one have historical events, and it'll have a year on the back of the card. So and there will be a timeline. So every time someone plays a card, they put it in the timeline to see where it fits chronologically, and then you flip it over to see what year it was actually in. And if it's in, you put it in the right space in the timeline, then you get to keep it there. But if you put it in the wrong space in the timeline, you have to draw another card. And the whole point is to get rid of all your cards. It's a fun game, but as I said, once you play it a lot, you kind of remember where everything fits in the timeline, so it kind of loses replayability. But it was a cheap one. It was only like $10, I think. Dixit. This is the sort of other party game I was referring to earlier, where you have all these weird abstract, like these cards with these weird abstract kind of drawings on it that you see right here, and you play it face down so no one else can see it, and you say a word or phrase or whatever, and then everyone else plays a card from their hand that's also weird, but they're trying to match the word or phrase that you say. Then you flip them all right side up, and then everyone has to try to guess which card belongs to you, while the other people are trying to trick the other players to make them think that their card is actually yours. Yeah, it's a fun game. I enjoy it. The funny thing about that game is I always lose, but I still like playing it. Family Feud, Blockbuster, pretty self-explanatory. It's like the game show Family Feud, except it's movie themed. They have a board, thing where the survey says, 10 people were surveyed. What was the most, likely movies? Like, movies that star John Candy or whatever. And you, I guess, name a movie with John Candy, and then their team gets to go down the line. If you get the X's, then the other team has to steal. Family Feud, you've seen the show. The thing about this game that's really frustrating is that it's not actually, it's whatever the surveyed people say. It's not necessarily the correct answer, which could get me so pissed off. If people say, like, I'm trying to think of one. There was one that was so obviously aliens, and they didn't say aliens. I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with these people? How could they not say aliens? And then there was another one where they're actually giving the wrong answer. Like, there was one, the category was Ryan Reynolds films. And on the list of the movies that you were supposed to guess, that the surveyed people said, there was Ryan Gosling films. They had like The Notebook and shit in there. I was like, that wasn't Ryan Reynolds, you morons. And the one that really got to me is movies that John Williams scored, which I thought, well, that's obvious. It's like, Star Wars, E.T., stuff like that. And most of his, like, in Jurassic Park wasn't even on there. Most of his most popular films weren't on there. Do you know what was number one? Star Trek! He didn't fucking score the music for Star Trek! That pissed me off so much. What's wrong with you, moron? Ah! Anyway. Wits End, we've played this game a lot. I'm kind of sick of this one too. To be fair, I was calling for it to be played for a while until I got sick of it. It's a trivia game. It's a board game. You're usually in teams. You go through the board and there's different categories of trivia questions, like odd one out. So they give you 4 options. You got to pick which one doesn't belong, or it's just flat out trivia question or whatever. It's fun, whatever, but it's a trivia board game similar to Trivia Pursuit, so it has limited playability. Anyway, yeah, I think that's it. I think I've gone through all the games, or all the ones worth watching. So anyone who was interested in my gaming collection, well, there you go. Those are the type of games that I like to play. If I want to do something funky, like, okay, if I name my top 3 what I think the best games are, I think I would have to go Dominion, of course. San Juan. I'm sticking with San Juan as being another best. And I'm going to go with the Trek in the National Parks. Which does maybe at the moment I just really want to play. Because no one will play it with me. But I really like that one. I think it's better than Ticket to Ride, to be honest. And so those are my favorite ones at the moment. As far as like party games go, I think at the moment I'm into that Half Truth game. I just like Codenames is probably objectively the best. I just played it way too freaking much. Stop it! Played it too much. And Fluxx, of course, I think I could always play Fluxx a bit more. I haven't actually played it. I only played the next gen version once and the Monty Python version twice. The DS9 and the Cartoon Network one I've had for longer, so I played these more. But anyway, I want to play Fluxx more too. I really, as far as the new games, I kind of like this Architectura. I think maybe I'll get sick of that after a while, but I think I played that several times. I think that's a lot of fun. The Camel game's a lot of fun too, and of course I like all those lion games, but I never get to play them. Anyway, so yes, these are the games I have. As I said, if those explanations didn't make any fucking sense to you, just use this little thing called Google, or do a YouTube search and watch someone who actually takes like 10 to 15 minutes to explain the games in greater detail, and you'll find if it's right for you or whatnot. Anyway, that was fun. That was fun talking about a hobby that I never, get to talk about on my channel. That's something how I like to spend a lot of my free time. Do something different. Not always talk about movies and shows, but there you go. Those, and that's probably the last one I'm going to do about the subject, unless it gets highly requested or whatnot. But if you want me to go into more detail about a game, I don't know if that's really my thing, but that's probably the only video I'll do about this, which is why, and it's an hour long, so that's pretty damn long. Anyway, that's it. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you guys on the real videos that I do later on. Have a good one.